Tonight, the White House releasing this dramatic video of the U.S. blowing up a boat in the southern Caribbean. President Trump says it was carrying drugs from Venezuela and that the strike killed 11 members of the notorious gang Tren de Aragua.
A Venezuelan narco boat carrying an estimated 2 tons of cocaine was completely destroyed by U.S. military forces in a precision airstrike on September 2nd, 2025. The vessel, linked to the notorious Tren de Aragua gang, was intercepted in international waters of the southern Caribbean, just minutes away from crossing territorial boundaries where legal complexities would have made interdiction nearly impossible. 11 crew members were killed instantly as the guided munition struck with devastating accuracy, sending a clear message to transnational criminal organizations that have turned the Caribbean into a highway of death and addiction. But what really happened that night? How did American forces track a single boat in millions of square miles of open ocean? Why was this particular vessel worth risking international incident? And what did they find in the wreckage that changed everything we thought we knew about cartel operations? September 1st, 2025, sunset over the Venezuelan coast. In a hidden inlet south of Puerto Cabello, armed men load vacuum-sealed packages into a sleek, dark vessel. Each package contains a kilogram of pure cocaine. Street value $52,000. 2,000 packages. $105 million worth of poison destined for American streets. The boat's captain, a former Venezuelan naval officer known only as El Navigante, checks his encrypted satellite phone one last time. The route is clear. American patrol patterns have been analyzed. The bribed officials have confirmed safe passage. What he doesn't know is that his every movement has been watched for the past 72 hours. An NSA listening post in Puerto Rico intercepted his first call 3 days ago. As his twin Mercury engines roar to life, pushing the 45-foot vessel away from shore, he has no idea that he's already dead. The countdown has begun, and there's no escape from what's coming. To understand why this vessel became a priority target, you need to understand Tren de Aragua. This isn't your typical drug cartel. Born in the blood-soaked corridors of Tocaron prison in Venezuela, Tren de Aragua started as a prison gang controlling contraband behind bars. But when the Venezuelan economy collapsed, they evolved, mutated, metastasized into something far more dangerous. Today, they operate in 25 countries with an estimated 40,000 members worldwide. Think about that. 40,000 criminals operating under a unified command structure. That's larger than the military forces of some NATO countries. Their annual revenue exceeds $2 billion. They control entire neighborhoods in Bogota, Santiago, Lima, and yes, even cities in the United States. In Chicago, they run protection rackets in Venezuelan immigrant communities. In Miami, they control high-end prostitution rings. In New York, they've infiltrated construction unions. In Texas, they manage safe houses for human trafficking operations that move hundreds of people per month. But their crown jewel has always been maritime drug smuggling. Using a fleet of over 200 vessels, they move 40% of all cocaine entering the United States through the Caribbean corridor. Each successful run nets them between $50 and $100 million in pure profit, money that funds violence, corruption, and terror across the Western Hemisphere. Intelligence analysts estimate that Tren de Aragua is directly responsible for over 3,000 murders in the last 5 years. Their victims include judges, journalists, police officers, and anyone who dares to stand in their way. This is not crime. This is warfare. And on September 2nd, America decided to fight back. The vessel itself was a masterpiece of criminal engineering. 45 feet of carbon fiber and Kevlar composite. He was smuggled out of Beirut 3 years ago and resurfaced in Caracas, operating under a new identity and funneling his payments back to the organization. The hull design was revolutionary. Using radar-absorbent material similar to that found on the B-2 stealth bomber, it could reduce its radar cross-section by 70%. To a radar operator, this 45-foot boat would appear no larger than a floating log. Custom exhaust cooling systems reduced the heat signature to barely above ambient temperature. Infrared sensors would struggle to distinguish the engines from the warm Caribbean water. But the real innovation was underneath. Retractable hydrofoils could lift the hull out of the water at high speed, reducing drag by 60% and allowing speeds up to 38 knots even when fully loaded. Faster than most Coast Guard interceptors. The fuel system was equally sophisticated. 3 separate tanks with automatic transfer pumps meant that even if one tank was punctured, the vessel could continue operating. Total range, 1,400 nautical miles without refueling. The response came back immediately. Pelican 1, this is Hammer Base. Maintain surveillance. Striker flight is inbound your position. Time on target, 0217 local. Striker flight was 2 FA-18. Super Hornets launched from a carrier group conducting routine exercises 150 miles to the north. Each carried AGM-114R Hellfire Romeo missiles, the same weapons that had killed ISIS leaders in Syria and al-Qaeda commanders in Yemen. Tonight, they would serve a different purpose. But first, a critical question had to be answered. Were there hostages on board? Intelligence suggested Tren de Aragua sometimes transported trafficking victims alongside drug shipments. Women and children forced into slavery. Their presence would make any strike impossible. For 30 agonizing minutes, every sensor focused on the target vessel. The infrared cameras counted heat signatures, 11 adults moving freely on deck and in the cabin. No one bound or restrained. No children's smaller heat signatures. Signal intelligence operators intercepted radio chatter, crude jokes, complaints about the weather, discussions about spending their payment in Aruba brothels, the voices of criminals, not victims. Behavioral analysts studied movement patterns. Everyone on board moved with purpose and authority. No one showed the cowering, hesitant movements of trafficking victims. At 0147, the final confirmation came from an unexpected source. A microphone dropped by the P-8 picked up music from the boat's sound system. Reggaeton at maximum volume. The crew was celebrating, confident, unaware. No legitimate fishing vessel blasts music at 2 a.m. in international waters. No innocent crew celebrates in darkness. These were cartel soldiers, and they had signed their own death warrant. The final authorization came at 0200 hours. All units, this is Hammer Base. You are cleared hot. I say again, you are cleared hot. Execute at 0217. At exactly 0217 local time, the ocean erupted in violence. The lead Super Hornet, call sign Striker 1, had been orbiting at 15,000 feet, invisible in the darkness. At the authorized time, the pilot flipped the master arm switch. Striker 1, rifle. The Hellfire Romeo dropped from its pylon, its rocket motor igniting 2 seconds later. The missile accelerated to Mach 1.3, covering the 3-mile distance to target in 11 seconds. In the boat below, the captain never saw it coming. The first indication of danger was a strange whistling sound that cut through the reggaeton. He had just enough time to look up before impact. The missile's tandem warhead struck exactly where planned, 2 meters aft of the cabin, directly above the main fuel tank. The first charge, a shaped copper penetrator, punched through the hull like a hot knife through butter. The main warhead followed a millisecond later, detonating inside the fuel compartment. The explosion was visible from space. Surveillance satellites recorded a flash that temporarily overwhelmed their sensors. The fireball rose 230 feet into the night sky, casting shadows on clouds 5 miles away. The boat didn't sink. It disintegrated. The bow section was blown 50 meters in one direction. The stern, with its twin engines still running, cartwheeled through the air before splashing down in flames. The human bodies were vaporized instantly. Their last moment of awareness was that strange whistling sound, then nothing. 2 tons of cocaine, worth $105 million, burned with a peculiar blue-green flame as the packages ignited. The smoke that rose into the Caribbean night carried enough cocaine residue to fail a drug test from a mile away. Secondary explosions continued for 3 minutes as fuel tanks, oxygen bottles, and ammunition cooked off. Each blast sent burning debris in a wider circle, creating a field of floating fire half a kilometer across. By 0221, it was over. Where a boat carrying 11 men had been 4 minutes earlier, there was now only burning wreckage and the smell of death. But the mission was far from complete. As the flames began to die down, Phase 2 commenced. The Coast Guard cutter Vigilant, which had been lurking 40 miles to the east, went to full speed. Within an hour, it would be on scene. From its deck, 4 rigid-hull inflatable boats launched into the darkness. Each carried a specialized team with a specific mission. Team Alpha would secure the debris field and search for survivors, though everyone knew there would be none. Team Bravo would collect evidence. Every piece of wreckage might contain intelligence. Team Charlie would document everything: photographs, video, water samples. Team Delta would search for anything that might have been blown clear of the explosion. As the RHIBs approached the burning debris field, the scene was apocalyptic. The ocean itself seemed to be on fire. Diesel fuel burned on the surface in rainbow patterns. Pieces of fiberglass and carbon fiber floated like burning islands. The air was thick with toxic smoke that forced the teams to don breathing apparatus. Team Alpha's thermal imaging confirmed what everyone already knew. No survivors. The explosion had been so complete that they couldn't even find intact bodies. Only fragments, pieces, nothing recognizable as human. Team Bravo began the grim work of evidence collection. Using long poles with nets, they pulled debris from the water. A piece of the hull with serial numbers still visible, part of an engine cowling with Cuban modification markings, burnt fragments of what might have been packaging. Every piece was photographed, tagged, and sealed in evidence bags. Chain of custody had to be perfect. This evidence might end up in international courts. Team Charlie's cameras captured everything in high definition. The burning debris from every angle, the oil slicks spreading across the calm water, the Coast Guard teams at work. Everything that would prove this was a legitimate military operation, not a massacre. But it was Team Delta that made the discovery that would change everything. Searching the outer edge of the debris field, they found 3 Pelican cases floating in the darkness. Heavy-duty waterproof cases designed to protect sensitive equipment. The explosion had blown them clear of the boat before the fire could reach them. Inside the first case, 3 encrypted satellite phones. Inside the second, a dozen USB drives wrapped in waterproof bags. Inside the third, handwritten notebooks in Spanish, detailed logs of every shipment for the past year. The intelligence value was incalculable. Back at NSA headquarters in Fort Meade, Maryland, the race was on. The satellite phones were flown directly from the carrier to Andrews Air Force Base, then driven to NSA in a convoy with more security than a presidential motorcade. Within hours, the best cryptanalysts in the world were taking them apart. Not just electronically, but physically. Every chip analyzed, every circuit traced. The encryption was sophisticated, Israeli-designed, Chinese-manufactured, with Russian modifications. A perfect example of international criminal cooperation. But the NSA had advantages the cartel couldn't imagine. Quantum computers that could perform calculations in seconds that would take traditional computers millions of years. AI systems that could identify patterns in seemingly random data. And most importantly, they already had pieces of the puzzle from other intercepted communications. By noon on September 3rd, they had cracked the first phone. The contact list read like a who's who of international crime: Colombian cocaine suppliers, Mexican cartel leaders, corrupt officials in a dozen countries, even legitimate businessmen who laundered money through real estate and cryptocurrency. The call history was even more revealing. Calls to Venezuela's intelligence service, text messages coordinating with customs officials, even a WhatsApp group chat called Los Intocables, the Untouchables, where cartel leaders shared jokes, photos, and murder plans. The second phone yielded financial records. Bank accounts in Cyprus holding $400 million, shell companies in Panama owning legitimate businesses across South America, cryptocurrency wallets with another $200 million in Bitcoin and Ethereum. Wire transfer records showed payments to judges, prosecutors, police chiefs, military officers, and politicians. The corruption reached higher than anyone had imagined, but it was the third phone that provided the smoking gun. A recording, apparently made by accident when someone pocket dialed during a meeting. The voices were clear, discussing the shipment, mentioning specific government officials who were protecting them, even joking about how the Americans would never stop them because they owned people in the DEA. The USB drives were equally damning. Spreadsheets with every shipment for the past 5 years, customer lists with real names and addresses, distribution networks in 15 American cities, even performance reviews for individual smugglers. One file contained photos from a party in Caracas, cartel leaders toasting with champagne, and in the background, clearly visible, 3 Venezuelan generals in full uniform. The handwritten notebooks were the most detailed of all. Page after page of routes, times, vessels, bribes paid, officials contacted. One entry from a week before the strike read, September 2, the big shipment, 2,000 kilos. Route Charlie, Captain Miguel. Inspector Rodriguez paid $50,000. Coast Guard shift change at midnight. Weather forecast clear. May God protect us. God apparently had other plans. The international response was swift and furious. Within hours of the strike, Venel Sorensen Spike, Venezuela's foreign minister, was on every news channel that would have him, denouncing American aggression. This was an act of war, he screamed at a UN press conference, The United States murdered 11 innocent fishermen in cold blood. Where's the proof they were criminals? Where's the due process? Where's the respect for international law? The Venezuelan Navy was placed on high alert. Their ancient Russian-built frigates put to sea in a show of force that fooled no one. Satellite imagery showed 2 of them breaking down before they even left sight of land. President Maduro himself addressed the nation, calling for revenge against the Yankee imperialists who had violated Venezuelan sovereignty. But the American response was devastating in its simplicity. At a Pentagon press briefing, the Secretary of Defense placed a single photograph on the podium. It showed the target vessel being loaded with cocaine in a Venezuelan port. The image was so clear, you could see the faces of the crew members. The same faces that appeared on Interpol wanted posters. These were not fishermen, he said quietly. These were terrorists who poisoned American children for profit, and we will hunt every last one of them to the ends of the earth. Then came the masterstroke. The State Department released the audio recording from the captured phone, the one with Venezuelan officials discussing the shipment. Within hours, it was playing on every news channel in the world. The corruption was undeniable. The Venezuelan government's involvement was proven beyond doubt. Even Venezuela's allies remained silent. Russia issued a tepid statement about respecting sovereignty, but took no action. China said nothing at all. Cuba quietly distanced itself from the controversy. The Organization of American States voted to support the U.S. action. Even countries that typically opposed American military operations understood the threat Tren de Aragua posed to the entire hemisphere. But the real impact came from within Venezuela itself. The released intelligence included names of corrupt officials. Within days, massive protests erupted in Caracas. Citizens demanded the arrest of generals and ministers named in the documents. The military began to fracture. Junior officers, tired of being associated with drug trafficking, began refusing orders. 2 generals fled the country. Another was found dead in suspicious circumstances. Tren de Aragua itself was in chaos. The loss of the shipment was bad enough, but the exposure of their entire network was catastrophic. Safe houses were abandoned. Bank accounts were emptied. Members went into hiding or fled to other countries. Their customers lost faith. The Sinaloa cartel canceled all contracts. Colombian suppliers demanded payment for previous shipments. European distributors found new sources. Within a month, Tren de Aragua had lost 60% of its operational capability. Within 3 months, over 200 members had been arrested in 15 countries. Within 6 months, the organization that had terrorized a continent was reduced to scattered cells fighting for survival. All from a single strike, on a single boat, yet even as authorities celebrated, the uncomfortable questions remained. Was this justice or execution? The 11 men on that boat never stood trial, never had lawyers, never got to plead their case. They were simply erased from existence by a missile fired from miles away. Yes, they were criminals. But in a civilized society, even criminals have rights. Or do they? When crime reaches the scale of warfare, do the rules change? When cartels have better equipment than some militaries, more money than some governments, and kill more people than some wars, are they still criminals? Or are they enemy combatants? International law is murky on this point. The strike occurred in international waters where no nation has clear jurisdiction. The target was a non-state actor engaged in transnational crime. The threat was deemed imminent to American national security. Legal scholars will debate the precedent for years. Some argue it opens the door to extrajudicial killings anywhere in the world. If America can destroy a drug boat in the Caribbean, can Russia destroy a weapons smuggler in the Black Sea? Can China eliminate pirates in the South China Sea? Where does it end? Others counter that extraordinary threats require extraordinary responses. When criminal organizations become indistinguishable from terrorist groups, they forfeit the protections of civil law. There's also the question of effectiveness. Yes, this strike hurt Tren de Aragua badly, but it didn't eliminate them. Within a year, they were rebuilding. New boats, new routes, new methods. And for every Tren de Aragua weakened, another cartel grows stronger. Nature abhors a vacuum, and so does organized crime. The street price of cocaine in New York didn't increase after the strike. If anything, it went down as other suppliers rushed to fill the gap. The number of overdose deaths didn't decrease. The drugs kept flowing just through different channels. So what was actually accomplished? Perhaps the real value wasn't in the drugs destroyed or the criminals killed, but in the message sent. For decades, cartels operated with impunity in international waters. They knew that beyond the 12-mile limit, they were essentially untouchable. This strike changed that calculation. Now, every narco boat captain has to wonder, is that a fishing vessel on the horizon or a Coast Guard cutter? Is that small plane a tourist or a surveillance drone? Is today the day a missile falls from the sky? Fear is a powerful deterrent, but it's also an evolutionary pressure. Already, intelligence reports suggest the cartels are adapting. Semi-submersible vessels that can run their entire route underwater are being built in jungle shipyards. Autonomous boats, guided by I need no crew at all. They can be operated from anywhere in the world via satellite. Drug submarines are being equipped with countermeasures. Chaff and flare dispensers to confuse missiles. Electronic warfare systems to jam radar. Even experimental stealth coatings that make them invisible to sonar. The cartels are hiring military contractors, former special forces operators from Russia, Middle East, South Africa, men who know how navies think and operate. They're investing in quantum encryption that even the NSA can't break. Yet. They're developing new routes through West Africa, using failed states as transshipment points beyond American reach. Some are abandoning maritime smuggling entirely, moving to aerial drones that can carry smaller loads, but are almost impossible to intercept. Others are going underground, literally. Tunnels that run for miles beneath borders, equipped with rail systems and ventilation. The war is evolving, and so must the response. The Pentagon is developing new technologies specifically for counter-narcotics operations. Satellites with resolution so fine they can read license plates from orbit. Drones that can stay aloft for months, providing persistent surveillance of entire ocean regions. AI systems that can predict smuggling routes by analyzing weather patterns, shipping traffic, and historical data. Directed energy weapons that can disable boats without destroying them. Non-lethal systems that can stop engines or jam electronics from miles away. But technology alone won't win this war. Every expert agrees. The real solution has to address demand, not just supply. As long as Americans are willing to pay $50,000 for a kilogram of cocaine, someone will find a way to deliver it. Treatment programs, education, economic opportunity in both source and destination countries. These unsexy long-term solutions are the only real answer, but they don't make for dramatic headlines. They don't produce spectacular explosions in the night. They don't satisfy the primitive human desire for vengeance against those who poison our communities. So the war continues, boat by boat, strike by strike, death by death. As I record this, it's been 1 month since the strike. The Caribbean is quiet tonight, but it's the quiet of a coiled spring. Somewhere in Colombia, new shipments are being prepared. Somewhere in Venezuela, new boats are being built. Somewhere in Mexico, new routes are being planned. And somewhere in America, new customers are waiting. The strike on September 2nd was a tactical victory, but the strategic war continues. Every day, the cartels probe for weakness, test new methods, recruit new soldiers. Every day, American forces watch and wait, sensors scanning, analysts analyzing, weapons ready. It's a chess game played with human lives, where checkmate is always one move away, but never quite achieved. Do you believe operations like this make us safer? Or do they simply escalate a war that can't be won through force alone? Are we addressing the real problem or just the symptoms? When does law enforcement become warfare? When does justice become vengeance? These are the questions that keep strategists awake at night. Questions that have no easy answers. What's certain is that this won't be the last strike. As long as the drugs flow, the missiles will fly. As long as the cartels adapt, the military will respond. As long as the money moves, the blood will spill.